The crosshairs settled on the figure 300 yards away. Marcus Chen's finger hovered over the trigger, his breath steady despite the impossible shot everyone said couldn't be made. The target moved with casual confidence, unaware that death was measuring the distance between them. But when the silence finally broke, it wouldn't be the sound of a gunshot that shattered the night. It would be the soft thud of a body hitting concrete, and the terrible realization that the wrong person had just paid the ultimate price for someone else's sins. The warehouse district at 2 a.m. was a graveyard of industrial ambition, where rusted shipping containers cast jagged shadows under flickering streetlights. Marcus Chen adjusted his position on the fire escape, the cold metal biting through his tactical vest. Through his scope, he tracked the figure moving between the containers below. Vincent Reeves, arms dealer, human trafficker, and the man who'd put a bullet in his partner's head 6 months ago. "Negative on the shot," came the voice through his earpiece. "Too many variables. Abort." Marcus's jaw tightened. Command didn't understand. They hadn't seen Danny bleeding out on that warehouse floor in Marseille, hadn't heard him gasping for air through punctured lungs while Reeves walked away whistling. "I have a clean line of sight," Marcus whispered into his comm. "Target is exposed." "Chen, stand down. That's an order." Through the scope, Reeves paused next to a black sedan, checking his phone. The man looked different than in the surveillance photos. Thinner, more nervous. 6 months of running from international law enforcement had taken its toll. Good. Marcus steadied his breathing, finger moving to the trigger. 300 yards in moderate wind, elevated position, moving target. His instructors at Quantico had called it impossible. His fellow snipers in the field had shaken their heads when he'd described the shot he planned to take tonight, but they hadn't trained for 15 years to make impossible shots. They hadn't spent sleepless nights calculating trajectories and wind patterns. They hadn't lived with the image of their best friend dying because they weren't good enough when it mattered most. "Chen, do you copy?" "Abort mission. We have new intelligence." Marcus switched off his comm. Whatever command had learned, it was too late. Reeves was climbing into the sedan. In 30 seconds, he'd be gone again, vanishing into the network of safe houses and corrupt officials that had kept him alive this long. The crosshairs found Reeves's center mass. Marcus exhaled slowly, squeezing the trigger with the patience of a man who'd waited half a year for this moment. The rifle kicked against his shoulder. The suppressed shot whispered through the night, barely audible above the distant hum of traffic. Through the scope, Marcus watched Reeves stumble, clutch his chest, then collapse beside the sedan. No movement, no sound, just the stillness of justice finally served. Marcus was already packing his rifle when he heard the footsteps on the fire escape below. Multiple sets, moving fast. He grabbed his gear bag and started climbing toward the roof, but the voice that called out made him freeze. "FBI! Marcus Chen! You're under arrest!" Special Agent Sarah Martinez emerged from the stairwell, weapon drawn, flanked by 4 tactical officers. Her face was grim in the harsh light of the tactical flashlights. Marcus had worked with her before on joint task force operations. She was good people, which made this infinitely worse. "Put the weapon down, Marcus. Slow and easy." Marcus set his rifle case on the metal grating, hands visible. "Sarah, you don't understand. That's Vincent Reeves down there. He killed Danny Volkov in Marseille. He's responsible for—" "That's not Vincent Reeves." Sarah's voice cut through, his explanation like a blade. "Vincent Reeves died in a car bombing in Prague 3 days ago. We've been trying to reach you for 20 minutes. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He looked down at the warehouse floor, where crime scene techs were already surrounding the body. Even from this distance, he could see they were setting up floodlights, photographing everything. Then who? Dr. James Morrison, pediatric surgeon at Children's Hospital, divorced father of 2. Sarah stepped closer, her weapon still trained on him. "He was here meeting an informant about a medical charity scam?" Someone who claimed to have information about stolen surgical supplies being sold on the black market. Marcus felt the world tilt on its axis. The man in his scope hadn't been Vincent Reeves running from justice. It had been an innocent doctor trying to help sick children, lured to this place by someone who knew exactly what would happen when Marcus arrived. "This is a setup," he said, his voice barely audible. "Someone knew I'd be here. Someone wanted me to take that shot." "Yeah, we figured that part out." Sarah gestured to her team, who moved in to secure Marcus's equipment. "The question is who set you up and why they wanted Dr. Morrison dead, bad enough to turn you into their weapon." As they cuffed him, Marcus looked down at the crime scene again. The body bag was being loaded into the coroner's van. A man who should have been home with his children was instead becoming evidence in a case that would destroy Marcus's career and quite possibly his life. But someone had orchestrated all of this. Someone had fed him intelligence about Reeves being at this location. Someone had made sure Dr. Morrison would be here at exactly the right time. Someone had turned him from a federal sniper into a murderer with surgical precision. The worst part was the growing certainty that this was just the beginning. You didn't go to this much trouble to kill one doctor and frame one federal agent unless it was part of something much larger. Something that required both Morrison dead and Marcus neutralized. As the tactical team escorted him toward the stairwell, Marcus's mind raced through the possibilities. Who had access to his communications? Who knew his psychological profile? Well enough to predict he'd take the shot despite orders to abort? Who wanted Dr. Morrison dead but couldn't risk being connected to the murder? The answer, when it came to him, made his blood run cold. Someone inside the bureau. Someone who knew exactly which buttons to push to turn him into a killer. Someone who'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. And Dr. Morrison's death was just the first move in a game Marcus was only beginning to understand. The interrogation room at the federal building smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Marcus had been sitting in the metal chair for 6 hours, watching Special Agent Martinez pace behind the one-way mirror's reflection. His lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Walsh, sat beside him taking notes that would probably never matter. "Let's go through this again," Martinez said, sliding a new set of photographs across the table. "You received intelligence that Vincent Reeves would be at the warehouse district at 0200 hours. Who was your source?" Marcus studied the crime scene photos. Dr. Morrison's body looked smaller in death, crumpled beside the sedan like discarded clothing. 2 kids would grow up without their father because Marcus had been played like a violin by someone who knew exactly which strings to pull. "The intel came through standard channels," Marcus said. "Encrypted message through the bureaus. Secure server. Authentication codes checked out. Except no one at the bureau sent that message." Martinez sat down across from him, her expression carefully neutral. "The authentication codes were stolen from Deputy Director Harrison's account 3 weeks ago during a cyber attack on the Portland field office." Marcus felt pieces clicking into place. Portland. That's where Morrison was from originally, wasn't it? He transferred to the Children's Hospital here 2 months ago. Very quietly, very suddenly. Martinez opened a thick file. Turns out Dr. Morrison wasn't just any pediatric surgeon. He was scheduled to testify before a congressional subcommittee next week about medical fraud in federal healthcare programs. What kind of fraud? The kind that involves tens of millions in stolen federal funds, fake medical supplies, inflated equipment costs, ghost patients. Martinez pulled out a document marked confidential. Morrison had been building a case for 18 months, names, dates, bank records, everything needed to bring down a network that stretches from here to Washington. Rebecca Walsh leaned forward. "My client was clearly manipulated into this situation. Someone used him to eliminate a witness." "That's what we think, too." Martinez's tone shifted, becoming less interrogator and more ally. "The question is who had access to both the Bureau's communication systems and detailed knowledge of Agent Chen's psychological profile." Marcus's mind went to the encrypted message that had started this nightmare. Someone had known he'd been hunting Reeves for 6 months. Someone had known he'd ignore orders to abort if given the chance for revenge. Someone had studied him like a lab rat and predicted his every move. "I need to see the original message," he said. Martinez hesitated, then slid a laptop across the table. The encrypted communication was displayed on screen, and Marcus read it with fresh eyes. Flash priority. Vincent Reeves confirmed at Warehouse District Grid 7G. Window of opportunity. 200 A230 hours. Subject traveling light. Minimal security. Previous surveillance indicates pattern of checking phone before vehicle entry. Recommend elevated. Position. Northeast corner for optimal sight lines. This is your chance to close the Marseille case. Deep cover, asset Prometheus. Prometheus, Marcus said. That's not a standard bureau code name. No, it's not. Martinez pulled up another screen. But it is the code name for a deep cover operation that was shut down 8 months ago. Officially, all assets were extracted and the program terminated. Officially. Right. The thing about deep cover assets is that sometimes they go so deep, they forget which side they're really working for. Martinez stood up, moving to the whiteboard where she'd mapped out the timeline. We think someone from the Prometheus program is still active, still using Bureau resources, and they needed Morrison dead. Marcus studied the timeline. Morrison's sudden move from Portland, his scheduled testimony, the cyber attack on the Portland field office. It was all connected, but the picture was still incomplete. What was Morrison going to testify about specifically? He asked. Martinez exchanged glances with someone behind the one-way mirror, then made a decision. A company called Medflow Systems. They're a government contractor that provides medical equipment to military bases and federal hospitals. Morrison discovered they were billing for equipment that was never delivered, then selling the actual supplies on the black market. How much are we talking about? Conservative estimate? 200 million over 5 years. Martinez sat back down. But here's the interesting part. Medflow Systems is owned by a holding company that's owned by another holding company that's eventually owned by Blackstone Maritime. Marcus knew that name. Blackstone Maritime was Vincent Reeves's front company, the legitimate business that had allowed him to move freely through international ports while trafficking weapons and people. If Medflow was connected to Blackstone, Reeves was already dead when I got that message, Marcus realized. But his network wasn't. Someone's still using his infrastructure. That's our theory, and they needed Morrison silenced before he could expose the medical fraud that was funding their operations. Martinez leaned forward. The question is who inside the Bureau is working for them? As if summoned by her words, the door opened and Deputy Director Thomas Harrison walked in. He was a big man with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention even in civilian clothes. Marcus had worked under him for 3 years and respected him, which made what happened next even more devastating. "Agent Chen," Harrison said, his voice carrying the weight of disappointment. "I'm sorry it's come to this. Sir, with respect, I think we're dealing with a compromised asset inside the Bureau." Harrison's expression didn't change. "I know. That's why Internal Affairs will be taking over this investigation effective immediately." He gestured toward the door, where 2 IA investigators waited. "Agent Martinez, you're relieved of this case." Martinez stood up slowly. "Sir, I don't think that's—" "Agent Martinez, you have your orders." Something in Harrison's tone made Marcus look more carefully at the deputy director. The man's suit was expensive, more expensive than a federal salary should allow. His watch was a Rolex Submariner that cost more than Marcus made in 6 months, and there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, the cold calculation of someone who'd already decided how this was going to end. "Actually, sir," Marcus said carefully, "I think Agent Martinez should stay. This case is more complicated than it appears." Harrison's smile was thin and sharp. "Agent Chen, you're in No position to make demands. You killed an innocent man tonight. A federal jury is going to want someone to pay for that. Unless that someone can provide information about larger crimes, Rebecca Walsh interjected. My client is willing to cooperate fully with any investigation that leads to the real criminals behind this conspiracy. Harrison's mask slipped for just a moment, and Marcus saw something that made his blood freeze. Not anger or disappointment, but calculation. The look of a man doing risk assessment, weighing variables, deciding whether Marcus was more valuable alive or dead. I'm afraid cooperation won't be possible, Harrison said. Agent Chen is being transferred to federal detention pending trial. For his own protection, of course. There are dangerous people who might want to silence him before he can testify. The FAI. IA investigators stepped forward, but Martinez moved between them and Marcus. Sir, I need to object to this. Agent Chen is cooperating fully, and there are significant questions about how he obtained the intelligence that led to... Agent Martinez, you're out of line. Harrison's voice carried the finality of an executioner. Report to my office first. Thing tomorrow morning. We need to discuss your future with the Bureau. As the IA investigators moved to escort Marcus away, he caught Martinez's eye and mouthed 2 words. Trust no one. Because now he understood the scope of what they were dealing with. This wasn't just about one corrupt asset or one fraudulent medical company. This went to the top of the federal law enforcement food chain. Deputy Director Harrison wasn't just covering up the conspiracy, he was running it, and Marcus had just become the only witness who could bring it all down, which meant he had maybe 24 hours to live before someone arranged an unfortunate accident in federal detention. The kind of accident that would permanently silence the sniper who knew too much about the wrong people. The federal detention center was a concrete tomb where careers went to die. Marcus sat on the narrow bunk in his cell, studying the small window that offered a view of nothing but razor wire and gray sky. He'd been here 18 hours, and every minute felt like borrowed time. The other inmates gave him a wide berth. Word traveled fast in lockup. Federal agent who'd killed an innocent doctor wasn't exactly a popular resume line. Which was probably intentional. Isolated prisoners were easier to eliminate. At 3 p.m., a guard appeared at his cell. Chen, you've got a visitor. Marcus expected his lawyer, maybe internal affairs with more questions. Instead, he found himself sitting across from Agent Martinez in the sterile visiting room, separated by reinforced glass and speaking through phones that were almost certainly monitored. This conversation is being recorded, Martinez said clearly for the microphones, then held up a small device that would scramble their words. But not anymore. Sarah, what are you doing? Harrison will have your badge for this. Harrison tried to suspend me this morning. Told me I was too emotionally invested in the case. Martinez leaned forward. Except I never filed a report about being emotionally invested. Makes you wonder how he knew, doesn't it? Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He's monitoring internal communications. More than that. I did some digging after you were transferred. Deputy Director Harrison has been fast-tracking certain cases, burying others, and personally handling asset assignments for the past 2 years. She slid a folded paper through the slot at the bottom of the glass. This is a list of federal agents who've died or disappeared while working cases connected to Blackstone Maritime operations. Marcus unfolded the paper. 12 names, including Danny Volkov. All classified as either killed in action, accidental death, or missing presumed dead. All had been investigating different aspects of what appeared to be the same criminal network. Jesus Christ, he whispered. He's been cleaning house for 2 years. It gets worse. Dr. Morrison wasn't the first witness to die before testifying. About MedFlow systems. 3 others have been killed in the past 8 months. Car accident, home invasion, drug overdose, all ruled as isolated incidents by different jurisdictions. Marcus studied the timeline. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for, a systematic elimination of anyone who could expose the medical fraud that was funding a criminal empire, and Harrison had been there to make sure the investigations never connected the dots. Need to get this to someone above Harrison's pay grade, Marcus said. I tried. Assistant Director Phillips is unreachable. His office says he's on classified assignment overseas. FBI Director Morrison is in budget meetings all week and not taking. Calls about ongoing investigations. Martinez's expression was grim. Everyone who outranks Harrison is conveniently unavailable or has been briefed by him personally about the rogue agent situation. Marcus felt the walls closing in. Harrison had positioned himself perfectly, the competent deputy director handling a tragic case of agent misconduct, insulating his superiors from the ugly details while quietly orchestrating the cover-up. There's something else, Martinez continued. I pulled Harrison's financial records. He's been making regular payments to a shell company called Cerberus Consulting, $50,000 a month for security assessments. Cerberus was Vincent Reeves's personal security firm, Marcus said. Even after Reeves died, someone's been paying Harrison to keep the network operational. The implications hit him like a sledgehammer. Harrison hadn't just been covering up crimes, he'd been actively participating in them. The deputy director of the FBI was a bought and paid for asset of the criminal organization he was supposed to be investigating. We need evidence, Marcus said. Something that can't be buried or explained away. Martinez glanced around the visiting room, then spoke quickly. Harrison's personal computer. If he's coordinating with Cerberus, there'll be digital evidence, encrypted communications, payment records, operational details. His office is in the federal building. Getting access without authorization would be a federal crime, Martinez finished, unless it was done by someone who's already facing life in prison and has nothing left to lose. Marcus understood. She was asking him to escape federal detention and break into the deputy director's office. It was career suicide for both of them, assuming they lived long enough to face the consequences. Even if I could get out of here, Harrison's office has electronic locks, security cameras, motion sensors. I can handle the technical aspects, a new voice said behind Martinez. Marcus looked up to see a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and nervous energy. Martinez gestured toward him. Agent Chen, meet Tommy Walsh, Rebecca's brother and the best cyber specialist the Bureau ever fired. Tommy sat down next to Martinez, his laptop already open. I've been tracking the Cerberus network for 6 months. Started when my sister asked me to look into your case. These people killed a dozen federal agents and framed you for murder. His fingers flew over the keyboard. Harrison's office security runs through the same server as the rest of the federal building. I can give you a 30-minute window with no cameras and disabled locks, but you'll need to get there. How am I supposed to escape federal detention? Martinez smiled grimly. You're not escaping. You're being transferred to the federal building for additional questioning. The transfer van has already been arranged, complete with authentic paperwork and a very understanding driver. Marcus stared at her. Sarah, if this goes wrong, we're all dead anyway. Harrison can't let any of us live, now that we know what he's done. She stood up, pocketing the scrambling device. The van arrives at 6 p.m. You'll have until 6:45 to get into Harrison's office, download everything you can find, and get back to the van. And if I don't make it back? Then Tommy uploads everything we have to every major news outlet simultaneously, and we hope public exposure is enough to stop them from killing more federal agents. As Martinez and Tommy left the visiting room, Marcus sat alone with the magnitude of what they were planning. Breaking into a federal building, hacking a deputy director's computer, exposing what appeared to be a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of law enforcement. It was insane. It was illegal. It was probably suicide. It was also the only chance they had to stop Harrison and his handlers from killing again. At 5:30 p.m., a guard appeared at Marcus's cell with shackles and a transport order. Time to go, Chen. The deputy director wants to ask you some more questions. Marcus almost laughed at the irony. Harrison was so confident in his control of the situation that he was personally signing the paperwork that would allow Marcus to break into his office. The transport van was waiting in the sally port, engine running. 2 U.S. Marshals sat in the front seat, their faces carefully neutral. As Marcus was loaded into the prisoner compartment, one of them turned around. "Agent Chen, I'm Marshal Davidson. Your partner, Danny Volkov, saved my life in Afghanistan back when we were both Army Rangers." The man's eyes were hard as flint. "When Agent Martinez told me what really happened to him, I volunteered for this assignment." The second marshal nodded. "I'm Rodriguez. Danny was my daughter's godfather. Whatever you need to do to nail the bastards who killed him, you got 30 minutes to do it." As the van pulled away from the detention center, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not just for himself, but for the possibility that Danny's death might finally be avenged. But first, he had to survive the next hour. Because Harrison would be expecting him at the federal building, and Marcus was beginning to suspect that the deputy director had no intention of letting him leave alive. The real question was whether Harrison had figured out that Marcus wasn't coming there to be interrogated. He was coming to destroy everything Harrison had built on the graves of 12 federal agents. Part 4. The federal building at dusk looked like a fortress of glass and steel, its windows reflecting the dying light like dead eyes. Marcus sat in the back of the transport van, watching Tommy Walsh's fingers dance across his laptop in the passenger seat. The young hacker had tapped into the building's security grid, displaying camera feeds and access logs in real time. "Harrison's still in his office," Tommy said. "But here's the problem. He's not alone. 3 men arrived 20 minutes ago. No visitor badges, no sign-in records. They came through the parking garage using Deputy Director access codes." Marshal Davidson studied the feeds. "Private security? Worse. Facial recognition says they're Cerberus operatives, the kind who clean up loose ends." Tommy's voice was tight with tension. "Harrison's not planning to interrogate you, Marcus. He's planning to execute you." Through the van's tinted windows, Marcus watched federal employees leaving for the day. Normal people with normal problems, heading home to families who didn't know their government was riddled with corruption. In 30 minutes, those same people might read about a federal agent who died during questioning, another tragic casualty in the war against crime. "Can you get me to Harrison's office without the cameras seeing?" Marcus asked. "Already done. I've looped the security feeds for the 7th floor, but those Cerberus guys will be watching the elevators and stairwells manually." Tommy pulled up building schematics. "There's a maintenance shaft that runs from the parking garage to the executive level. It's tight, but doable." Marshal Rodriguez checked his weapon. "We can't go with you. 3 armed marshals in the federal building would raise too many questions, but we'll be monitoring police frequencies. First sign of trouble, we're coming in hard." The plan was elegant in its desperation. Marcus would enter through the parking garage, take the maintenance shaft to the 7th floor, break into Harrison's office while the deputy director was distracted by his Cerberus associates, download whatever evidence he could find, and escape the same way. It would have been suicide under normal circumstances, but nothing about this was normal anymore. At 6:15 p.m., Marcus slipped through the parking garage service entrance using Tommy's hacked access card. The underground level was nearly empty, just a few late workers' cars and the fluorescent hum of security lighting. The maintenance shaft was exactly where the schematics indicated, a narrow, vertical tunnel barely wide enough for a man's shoulders. 20 minutes later, Marcus emerged on the 7th floor covered in dust and cable grease. The executive corridor was empty, its thick carpeting muffling his footsteps as he approached Harrison's corner office. Through the frosted glass, he could see silhouettes, 4 figures in conversation, their voices too low to make out words. The office next door belonged to Assistant Director Phillips, who was supposedly overseas on classified assignment. Marcus used Tommy's device to disable the electronic lock and slipped inside. Phillips's office shared a wall with Harrison's, and the sound carried better than expected. "Told you Chen was becoming a problem months ago," Harrison was saying. "Should have eliminated him after Marseille. Clean kills are always preferable to messy frames." replied a voice Marcus didn't recognize. But your plan worked. Chen's discredited, Morrison's dead, and the MedFlow investigation dies with them. What about Martinez? She's been asking questions. Car. Accident. Tomorrow morning. Icy roads. Very tragic. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. They were planning to kill Sarah within hours. He activated Tommy's recording device and pressed it against the wall, capturing every word. The congressional hearing is next week, Harrison continued. Without Morrison's testimony, they have no case. MedFlow will be cleared, and we can resume operations at full capacity. 200 million was just the beginning, the unknown, Voice said. With Morrison dead and the heat off, we're looking at bilateral expansion. Military medical contracts in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Somalia. Conservative estimate, $500 million in diverted funds over the next 3 years. Marcus's hands shook as he held the recorder. They weren't just stealing medical supplies. They were profiting from the suffering of wounded soldiers and sick, children across the globe. And Harrison, a man sworn to protect and serve, was orchestrating it all. What about the other witnesses? Harrison asked. Dr. Sarah Chen in San Francisco, Dr. Michael Torres in Atlanta, Nurse Supervisor Janet Mills in Denver. All scheduled for elimination within the next 72 hours. After that, no one left alive will be able to connect MedFlow to the missing supplies. More innocent people. Marcus realized with growing horror that Morrison's murder had been just one move in a massive operation to silence everyone who could, expose the medical fraud. They were planning to kill at least 4 more people, maybe dozens. Sir? Tommy's voice crackled through his earpiece. You've been in there 15 minutes. Time to move. Marcus needed to get into Harrison's office, but the conversation was still ongoing. He could hear movement now, chairs scraping, footsteps. The meeting was breaking up. Chen should be arriving any minute, Harrison said. Make it quick and clean. Suicide during questioning. Remorse over killing an innocent doctor. Understood. Where do you want the body found? Interrogation room 3. I'll be in my office reviewing files, completely unaware of the tragedy unfolding down the hall. Marcus heard the office door open, followed by footsteps in the corridor. Through Phillips's window, he watched 3 men in dark suits walk toward the elevators, Cerberus operatives, heading down to intercept a prisoner transport that would never arrive. He waited 30 seconds, then slipped out of Phillips's office and approached Harrison's door. The deputy director was alone now, probably reviewing. His alibi for the night Marcus Chen died in federal custody. The electronic lock yielded to Tommy's device with a soft click. Marcus entered Harrison's office silently, finding the deputy director seated behind his desk with his back to the door, typing on his computer. Deputy director, Marcus said softly. Harrison spun around, his face cycling through surprise, fear, and calculation in rapid succession. His hand moved toward the desk drawer where he probably kept a service weapon. I wouldn't, Marcus said, revealing the pistol he'd taken from Phillips's office safe. We need to talk. Harrison's composure returned with practiced ease. Agent Chen, I was wondering when you'd show up, though I must admit, I expected you to arrive in shackles. Your Cerberus friends are waiting downstairs for a transport that's not coming. Meanwhile, I've been listening to your little planning session. Medical fraud, murdered witnesses, $500 million in stolen funds. Marcus moved closer to the desk. Quite an operation for a federal law enforcement officer. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Harrison said. This goes deeper than one corrupt deputy director. I'm just middle management in an organization that owns senators, judges, cabinet members. Kill me, and they'll send someone worse. Maybe, but at least you won't be around to see it, Harrison smiled. You won't kill me, Chen. You're not a killer. You're a soldier who follows orders. Even when you shot Morrison, you thought you were serving justice. That's what makes you useful. Useful for what? The same thing you've always been useful for. Following orders and asking questions later. Harrison's hand edged toward the desk. Drawer again. Do you really think tonight was an accident? That Martinez stumbled onto this conspiracy by pure chance? Marcus felt the first cold touch of doubt. What are you talking about? Agent Martinez has been working for us for 8 months. Ever since her brother got himself arrested for hacking federal databases and needed someone with influence to make his problems go away. Harrison's smile widened. She's been feeding you information, guiding your investigation, making sure you ended up exactly where we needed you. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sarah Martinez, the agent he'd trusted with his life, the woman who'd orchestrated his escape from federal detention, working for the same people who'd murdered Danny Volkov and framed him for Morrison's death. You're lying. Am I? Check your recording device, Chen. The one Martinez gave you. Built-in GPS tracker, remote activation, everything we've said tonight has been transmitted directly to Cerberus Security. Harrison opened his desk drawer slowly, revealing not a weapon but a tablet computer. Your friends downstairs have been listening to every word. They're on their way up now. Marcus looked at the device in his hand, seeing it with new eyes. The red recording light wasn't just indicating active recording, it was a beacon, broadcasting his location to the people who wanted him dead. And Sarah Martinez, the woman he'd trusted to help him expose the conspiracy, had been working for Harrison all along. The elevator chimed in the hallway outside. Footsteps approached, multiple sets, moving with military precision. Marcus was trapped in Harrison's office with nowhere to run, and no one left to trust. But as the Cerberus operatives reached the door, Marcus realized something Harrison hadn't counted on. The recording device might be compromised, but everything they'd said had also been transmitted to Tommy Walsh's laptop in the van outside, and Tommy Walsh had never worked for the FBI, which meant he'd never been turned by Harrison's people. The office door burst open just as Marcus dove behind Harrison's desk, gunfire erupting in the confined space. But instead of feeling like a trapped animal, Marcus felt so